Chaos erupts from casting choices. The original director, Jeff Canoe, envisions Liam Neeson as Keating. Then Robin Williams is cast, but refuses to show up on the first day outside Atlanta because he doesn't want to work with Canoe. The studio literally burns down already built sets and replaces the director. That's behind-the-scenes upheaval. The film could have never happened this way. I promise 20 weird facts about Dead Poet Society. And stay tuned for the bonus fact. It's the one producers really didn't want you to know. Now, let's jump in. Stay riveted. Fact 1. It wasn't just a smooth casting. Not smooth, but an inferno of studio impatience. On day 1, Robin Williams doesn't turn up because he refuses to work with the original director, Jeff Canoe. Sets are built, then incinerated by the studio, and the director is replaced. What audiences don't know, the film nearly collapsed before a single Carpe Diem was delivered. This is filmmaking stripped raw. The emotional fallout lingers. Even cast could feel the embers. This isn't an upbeat, inspirational origin. It's creative pyrotechnics with real-world consequences. Fact 2. It wasn't convention. It was living together. Peter Weir directs a cast of mostly inexperienced young actors, Hawk, Charles, Leonard, so he has them actually live together during shooting. Not a mere bonding exercise, but a strategic immersion to capture genuine chemistry as their relationships evolve on the screen. He also shoots chronologically. It isn't training, it's emotional excavation in real time. The result, relationships feel alive. What audiences don't know, that the warmth and friction you sense aren't actors pretending. They're forged in midnight corridors, shared call sheets, real-time vulnerability. Fact 3. It wasn't easy weather simulation. It was relocation. The original plan: shoot in Rome, Georgia. But replicating New England snow is maddeningly expensive, so they moved the whole production to Delaware, where snow is free and real. The studio transforms storefronts, strips modern signs, rips off contemporary vibes. Even off-camera, Weir orders the young cast not to slip into modern slang. It isn't about convenience. It's about immersive authenticity. What audiences don't know, every cobblestone, every frozen breath, it's raw Delaware reality, not a painted stage. Fact 4. It wasn't just improv. It was a containment zone. Robin Williams is an improvisational volcano. Weir uncorks that energy, but remains vigilant, tethering Williams so he doesn't erupt beyond character. He wants humor rooted in personality, not table-flipping clowning. It wasn't improv for laughs. It was disciplined spontaneity to amplify Keating's soul, not to overshadow the boys. What audiences don't know. Every Williams ad-lib feels natural but is actually tethered by a director weighing every heartbeat, every line, for maximum emotional impact. Fact 5. It wasn't fiction. It was personal. The electrifying guidance of John Keating isn't pure invention. It's loosely based on Tom Schulman's real-life teacher, Samuel Pickering, who used eccentric, impulsive methods. Schulman watched him entertain himself in class, and not to awaken students deliberately. What audiences don't know. Keating's nonconformist soul didn't stem from an ideological mentor. It came from a whimsical professor who simply found joy in unpredictable teaching. The magic on screen masks the purposeless impulse of Pickering's methods, and the gap between dramatic narrative and real academic anarchy is wild. Fact 6. It wasn't just a film set. It was an experiment in time travel. Peter Weir wanted his young cast to feel trapped in the late 1950s, so he banned them from watching television, listening to modern music, or even speaking in contemporary slang during production. It wasn't method acting. It was cultural quarantine. The boys felt stripped of their modern identities, slowly sinking into the rhythms of an older era. What audiences didn't know is that the sense of isolation on screen, the rigid halls, the suffocating tradition, wasn't imagined. It was lived daily. They didn't just wear period costumes. They inhabited a world without Walkmans, without MTV, without modernity. And when the cameras rolled, their unease and restraint were not rehearsed. They were real, bottled from weeks of containment. Fact 7. It wasn't just a movie audition. It was psychological warfare. Ethan Hawke, still a teenager, doubted himself constantly. He worried he wasn't good enough to stand beside Robin Williams. Weir leaned into this insecurity deliberately. He allowed Williams to tower over Hawk in early scenes, keeping Hawk quiet, uncertain, and reserved. Hawk later revealed he felt humiliated at times by the process, but that vulnerability, those tremors in his voice, became Todd Anderson's soul on screen. What audiences didn't know is that Todd's arc wasn't simply scripted. It was carved from Hawk's own teenage fear. That raw hesitance wasn't an actor's trick. It was Hawk's genuine dread, weaponized by a director who knew that art sometimes requires breaking down a young performer to rebuild him stronger. Fact 8. It wasn't a classroom. It was a stage of chaos. Robin Williams, Unleashed, often ignored the script entirely, riffing off Shakespeare or inventing new jokes mid-take. The students, many untrained actors, didn't know what was coming. Their laughter, their gasps, their stunned silence, all authentic. Weir would let cameras roll through the madness, capturing unscripted gold. But chaos had consequences. Continuity was often impossible, with scenes stitched together from wildly different ad-libs. Crew members groaned over long shooting days, but Weir defended the process. The unpredictability wasn't sloppy, it was life. What audiences didn't know is that every time Keating seems to genuinely shock his students, he actually is. Williams wasn't acting a teacher inspiring boys. He was a teacher inspiring actors. Fact 9. It wasn't simply prep school life, it was theater. Weir cast actual prep school students as extras to populate the background. He didn't want polished Hollywood kids. He wanted stiff, awkward, rigid bodies conditioned by strict private education. The contrast between them and the main characters created texture. The leads looked alive in comparison, sparking against the silent boys in the corners. Off-camera, though, these prep schoolers often mocked the actors, calling them fake intellectuals and sneering at the movie's poetic obsession. That friction bled into the film. When you see glares from background students in the dining hall, they aren't acting. They're annoyed. What audiences didn't know is that authenticity sometimes comes not from performance, but from real resentment simmering just outside the frame. Fact 10. It wasn't just, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." It was mutiny. The iconic scene nearly didn't make the final cut. Studio executives found it too sentimental and begged Weir to trim it. They feared audiences would laugh instead of cry. Weir fought viciously for it, refusing to let go. The boys rehearsed standing on their desks again and again, balancing both fear and reverence. On the day of filming, Williams stood quietly as each actor made the climb. For some, their voices cracked not from acting but from the weight of the moment. What audiences didn't know is that the film's most famous image, the boys rising in defiance, was nearly erased by corporate scissors. It wasn't just the characters taking a stand. It was the director himself, refusing to bow to conformity. Fact 11. It wasn't simply inspiration, it was rebellion on film stock. The studio wanted Dead Poet Society to be a light drama, closer to a sentimental teen story. But Peter Weir fought to preserve its darker edges. He leaned into themes of repression, mortality, and conformity's brutality. The biggest fight came over Neil's tragic fate. Executives begged for a softer resolution, suggesting he run away instead. Weir refused, arguing that the boy's pain would mean nothing without sacrifice. What audiences didn't know is that the studio tried to neuter the movie into a warm hug. Instead, it emerged as a cry against authoritarian structures. The blood on Neil's pillowcase wasn't just a story choice, it was a battle won against corporate interference, and the moment that burned the film into cultural memory. Fact 12. It wasn't simple acting. It was lived heartbreak. Robert Sean Leonard, who plays Neil, carried the weight of the tragedy on his young shoulders. He threw himself into rehearsal, memorizing poetry, embodying Shakespeare, burning with his character's passion. But when it came to filming Neil's death scene, Weir shielded him. The actual moment of suicide was never shown to the boys on set. Leonard filmed it largely in isolation, kept apart from the group. This separation made the aftermath raw. When the others discover his death, their tears and shaken silence are unfeigned. They hadn't seen how it unfolded, only the result. What audiences didn't know is that Weir staged the tragedy to devastate the cast in real time, embedding genuine shock into their performances. The grief wasn't rehearsed. It was real. Fact 13. It wasn't just, "Oh, Captain." It was chaos on call sheets. That final desk standing scene was shot over several days. Lighting had to remain identical. Continuity was brutal. And the desks wobbled constantly. Crew members stacked sandbags under the furniture, praying no one slipped. The boys climbed repeatedly, sometimes 20 takes in a row, boots scraping wood, voices cracking from repetition. Robin Williams stood still through it all, watching his young co-stars find their bravery take after take. At one point, Weir whispered to Hawk to hesitate longer, to make his final stand the climax. What audiences didn't know is that the sequence, which plays like a spontaneous uprising, was meticulously engineered over exhausting days. Fact 14. It wasn't a film score. It was heartbeat and hush. Maurice Jarre, the legendary composer, wrote a restrained, almost haunting soundtrack. Producers initially panicked, expecting a rousing orchestral anthem. Instead, Jarre delivered fragile notes of synthesizer and minimal orchestration, weaving silence into music. Weir insisted this was the point. The quiet gave space for words and performances to breathe. The studio complained it sounded too empty. But Jarre understood that the film's power lay not in bombast but in whispers. What audiences didn't know is that the absence of grand crescendos was intentional. The stillness of Neil's bedroom, the silence before applause in the play, the soft air in Keating's classroom, those weren't gaps. They were music itself. It wasn't a swelling score. It was poetry made audible. Fact 15. It wasn't simple marketing. It was sabotage by doubt. Early test screenings were disastrous. Some audiences laughed in the wrong places, groaned at the sentiment, even mocked the poetry. Executives feared they had a flop on their hands. Posters were redesigned. Trailers re-edited. Even Williams' image toned down to appear more serious. But word of mouth spread after release. Viewers connected emotionally in a way focus groups never predicted. The film slowly climbed week by week until it became a phenomenon. What audiences didn't know is that Dead Poets Society was born under a cloud of skepticism. Its rise wasn't fueled by studio confidence, but by audiences defying corporate assumptions. In the end, it wasn't numbers that saved it. It was hearts broken wide open. Fact 16. It wasn't just a dorm set. It was a prison of routine. Weir shot many of the boarding school interiors in a real prep school, not a soundstage. The walls were cold stone, the windows drafty, and the rooms genuinely claustrophobic. The young actors had to live in these spaces for long shooting days, feeling the sting of discipline at every turn. Weir intentionally kept the lighting harsh and the hallways narrow, emphasizing entrapment. What audiences didn't know is that the oppressive weight of Welton Academy wasn't only performance. The cast actually lived its chill, trudging through icy corridors in stiff uniforms day after day. By the time cameras rolled, their posture, their tension, their restless longing to break free. It wasn't acting. It was survival inside a carefully controlled cage. Fact 17. It wasn't a teacher role. It was an exorcism of fears. Robin Williams was terrified of being typecast as just a comedian. After Good Morning Vietnam, studios wanted him for more zany comic relief characters. Dead Poets Society was his gamble. He fought to be taken seriously, pushing himself to dial down the manic energy and let stillness speak. What audiences didn't know is that Williams nearly lost the role because of those fears. The studio doubted he could restrain himself. But his subtlety became revolutionary. His whispered encouragements, his quiet pauses, his eyes doing more than words ever could. These were acts of defiance against Hollywood's pigeonholing. Keating wasn't only liberating the boys. Williams was liberating himself from the cage of comedy, proving that he wasn't just funny. He was profound. Fact 18. It wasn't an ending. It was a haunting. After the final shot, Todd standing on his desk whispering, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," the set went silent. Cast and crew broke down crying, hugging each other in the echoing classroom. They knew they had filmed something eternal. But the boys carried that weight home. Many reported they couldn't shake Neil's death, or the suffocating world of Welton for months. Ethan Hawke said he avoided rewatching the movie for years because it reopened too many wounds. What audiences didn't know is that Dead Poets Society left scars, not just inspiration. The fictional loss lingered in the hearts of real teenagers who had lived it day after day. When we watch their grief on screen, we're watching trauma imprinted on young actors, unable to fully leave Welton behind. Fact 19. It wasn't just American success. It was global rebellion. Around the world, students embraced the film as their anthem against conformity. In some countries, teachers reportedly banned screenings, fearing it encouraged disobedience. In classrooms from Brazil to Japan, students stood on desks in imitation, sparking waves of protest against strict school policies. What audiences didn't know is that Dead Poets Society became more than a movie. It became a movement. A quiet film set in 1959 America suddenly influenced teenagers in nations battling authoritarian rule in the late 80s and early 90s. For them, Carpe Diem wasn't just a catchphrase. It was a manifesto. Hollywood had released a rebellion it didn't anticipate, and classrooms across the globe became stages for defiance. Not cinema, but revolution. Fact 20. It wasn't just an Oscar win. It was a Hollywood battle scar. Dead Poets Society won Best Original Screenplay, but Weir lost Best Director, and Williams lost Best Actor. Many insiders whispered that the Academy punished the film for being too sentimental. What audiences didn't know is that within Hollywood circles, the film was divisive. Some executives dismissed it as manipulative. Others hailed it as genius. But the truth? It carved a new path for serious teen dramas, proving young adult stories could carry tragedy, artistry, and literary weight. The scars of its Oscar snubs became part of its legend. The Academy may have been split, but audiences crowned it immortal. Awards fade, but the image of boys on desks outlasted every golden statue. Bonus fact. It wasn't written for Williams at all. The original vision for John Keating was darker, more cynical, almost bitter. A man crushed by conformity, not liberated by poetry. But when Robin Williams stepped in, he transformed it. He added humor, gentleness, vulnerability. What audiences didn't know is that the script was rewritten around him. Scenes were reshaped to accommodate his energy, even his pauses. Without him, Keating could have been a tragic, embittered teacher. With him, he became unforgettable. The bonus truth is this. Dead Poets Society wasn't saved by fate, or chance, or even by poetry. It was saved by one actor refusing to be caged, reshaping the film's destiny by daring to whisper, Carpe Diem. Dead Poets Society wasn't just a movie about students seizing the day. It was a set drenched in fear, rebellion, improvisation, and sacrifice. Behind every frame lies a battle, against conformity, against studios, against time itself. And somehow, from chaos came a film that still makes hearts rise. So, tell me, which behind-the-scenes truth shocked you most? And remember, seize the day. Subscribe, like, and join us next time as we uncover more secrets Hollywood never wanted you to know.